In the quiet halls of the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History, Dr. Rebecca Martinez had dedicated her career to preserving the visual legacy of 19th-century America. As the chief photographic conservator, she had examined thousands of daguerreotypes, tintypes, and early glass plate negatives, each one a window into a world that existed long before anyone alive today had drawn their first breath. But on this grey December morning, as she carefully unpacked a recently acquired collection from a private estate in Montana, one particular photograph would challenge everything she believed about the nature of photographic truth. The image appeared to be a straightforward saloon interior from 1894, taken in what the accompanying documentation identified as Silver Falls, a now-vanished mining town in the Montana Territory. The photograph showed a typical frontier drinking establishment, complete with a mahogany bar, brass fixtures, and the usual collection of patrons one might expect to find in such a place during the height of the American frontier period. Dr. Martinez positioned the photograph under her conservation lamp and began her standard examination process. The technical quality was exceptional for its era, suggesting the work of a skilled professional photographer rather than an amateur enthusiast. The composition captured the full breadth of the saloon's interior, from the ornate carved bar to the tin ceiling, with natural light filtering through tall windows, creating a complex interplay of shadows and highlights across the scene. As she began documenting the various figures visible in the photograph, Dr. Martinez noted the typical characters one would expect to encounter in a frontier saloon. There was the bartender, a heavy-set man with rolled sleeves and a white apron, polishing glasses behind the bar. Several patrons clustered around tables, their faces bearing the weathered look of men who had spent their lives working in harsh conditions. Near the back of the establishment, a woman in an elaborate dress sat at a piano, her fingers poised over the keys as if caught in the middle of a performance. The scene captured a moment of everyday frontier life, preserved with remarkable clarity, despite the technical limitations of 1890s photography. Every detail seemed authentic and period-appropriate, from the clothing worn by the patrons to the bottles lined up behind the bar. It was exactly the sort of historical document that museums treasured, a genuine glimpse into America's past. But as Dr. Martinez continued her examination, her attention was drawn to the large mirror that dominated the wall behind the bar. Like many saloons of the era, this establishment featured an ornate mirror that served both practical and aesthetic purposes, reflecting light throughout the room and creating an illusion of greater space. The mirror's surface showed the expected reflection of the saloon's interior, but something about the reflected image made Dr. Martinez pause in her work. She reached for her high-powered magnifying glass and focused on the mirror's reflection. What she saw there would haunt her for the rest of her career. While the mirror faithfully reflected most elements of the saloon's interior, there was one crucial difference. Standing among the reflected patrons was a figure that did not appear anywhere in the actual saloon scene. The additional figure was that of a man in dark clothing, positioned near the center of the reflected space, where no corresponding person stood in the real saloon. He appeared to be watching the other patrons with an intensity that was somehow visible even in the small reflected image. Most disturbing of all, while every other reflected figure showed the natural reversal one would expect from a mirror image, this additional figure appeared to be looking directly out of the reflection, as if he were aware of the photographer and perhaps even the future viewers of the image. Dr. Martinez set down her magnifying glass and rubbed her eyes, certain that she must be seeing things. The long hours of detailed conservation work often played tricks on the mind, causing conservators to see patterns and details that weren't actually there. But when she looked again, the figure in the reflection remained exactly as she had first observed it. She reached for her digital microscope, a piece of modern equipment that could capture and magnify details far beyond what the human eye could perceive. As the high-resolution image appeared on her computer screen, Dr. Martinez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the museum's climate-controlled environment. The figure in the reflection was undeniably present, and the enhanced image revealed details that made the anomaly even more disturbing. The mysterious figure's clothing appeared to be from a different era entirely, more formal and elaborate than what the other patrons were wearing. His face, while partially obscured by shadows, showed features that seemed somehow ageless, as if he existed outside the normal flow of time. Most unnaturally, the figure appeared to be casting no reflection of his own within the mirror, suggesting that he was somehow present in the reflected space without existing in the physical world. Dr. Martinez saved the enhanced image and leaned back in her chair, trying to process what she was seeing. In her 20 years as a photographic conservator, she had encountered numerous examples of early photographic anomalies. Double exposures, chemical stains, and processing errors could all create unusual effects that might be mistaken for supernatural phenomena. But this image was different. The mysterious figure was too clearly defined, too deliberately positioned to be explained by simple photographic error. She decided to research the provenance of the photograph more thoroughly. According to the documentation that had accompanied the collection, the image had been part of an estate belonging to one Harrison Blackwood, a wealthy collector who had died the previous year at the age of 87. Blackwood had been known for his extensive collection of Western Americana, particularly photographs documenting the development of mining towns throughout Montana and the surrounding territories. Dr. Martinez accessed the museum's research databases and began searching for additional information about the photograph's history. She found records indicating that Blackwood had acquired the image at an auction in 1973, but the trail grew cold beyond that point. The original photographer was listed as unknown, which was not uncommon for frontier photography of that era. As she continued her research, Dr. Martinez discovered something that made her pause. The town of Silver Falls, where the photograph had supposedly been taken, had a history that was both brief and tragic. According to territorial records, the settlement had been established in 1892 as a mining camp, had flourished for approximately 3 years, and had then been completely abandoned in 1895, following a series of unexplained events that had terrified the local population. Newspaper archives from the period contained scattered reports about strange occurrences in Silver Falls during its final year of operation. Residents had reported seeing figures that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Miners claimed to hear voices in empty tunnels. Most disturbing of all, several people had reported encounters with individuals who seemed familiar but who could not be identified or located when sought out. These reports had been dismissed by territorial authorities as the products of isolation, harsh living conditions, and possibly contaminated water supplies from the mining operations. But the accounts were numerous enough and consistent enough to suggest that something genuinely unusual had been occurring in Silver Falls during its final months of existence. Dr. Martinez found a particularly intriguing newspaper article from the Helena Daily Herald, dated March 15, 1895, just months before the town's abandonment. The article reported that Silver Falls had been experiencing what the writer described as manifestations of a most peculiar nature, including the appearance of individuals who seemed to exist only partially in the physical world. The article mentioned that among the most frequently reported phenomena was the appearance of a man in formal dress who was seen in various locations throughout the town, but who left no physical trace of his presence. Witnesses described him as watching the townspeople with an unsettling intensity, as if he were studying them for some unknown purpose. Dr. Martinez felt another chill as she read this description. Could the figure in the mirror reflection be the same mysterious individual that had been reported in Silver Falls over a century ago? The idea seemed impossible, but the similarities were too striking to ignore. She decided to examine the photograph even more closely, using advanced digital enhancement techniques to extract every possible detail from the image. As she worked with the mirror reflection, she began to notice other anomalies that she had initially missed. The lighting in the reflected scene was subtly different from the lighting in the actual saloon. While the real scene showed natural shadows and highlights consistent with the windows and oil lamps visible in the establishment, the reflection seemed to be lit by a different light source entirely, one that cast shadows in directions that defied the physical layout of the room. More disturbing still, as Dr. Martinez enhanced different sections of the reflection, she began to see additional figures that had no counterparts in the real scene. These figures were less distinct than the central mysterious man, appearing almost as suggestions of human forms rather than clearly defined individuals. But their presence suggested that the mirror was somehow reflecting not just the physical reality of the saloon, but something else entirely. Dr. Martinez printed out the enhanced images and spread them across her workstation, using a magnifying glass to examine details that even the digital enhancement couldn't fully clarify. As she studied the photographs, she began to notice patterns in the positioning of the mysterious figures that suggested they were not random apparitions, but were arranged according to some kind of purpose or design. The central figure, the man in formal dress, appeared to be the focal point around which the other anomalous figures were arranged. They seemed to be oriented toward him, as if he were their leader or the source of their presence in the reflected space. This organization suggested intelligence and intention rather than simple supernatural manifestation. Dr. Martinez decided to consult with her colleague, Dr. James Whitmore, who specialized in 19th century photography techniques and had extensive experience in detecting and analyzing photographic manipulation from that era. She called him to her laboratory, explaining only that she had found an unusual image that required expert analysis. When Dr. Whitmore arrived and examined the photograph, his initial reaction was similar to Dr. Martinez's own. He noted the exceptional technical quality of the image and the interesting composition that captured frontier life with remarkable detail. But when she directed his attention to the mirror reflection, his expression changed dramatically. Dr. Whitmore studied the enhanced images for several minutes before speaking. He confirmed that the anomalies Dr. Martinez had observed were indeed present and were not the result of any photographic technique or processing method known to have been available in 1894. The mysterious figures in the reflection appeared to be genuine anomalies that defied conventional explanation. Most significantly, Dr. Whitmore pointed out something that Dr. Martinez had not yet noticed. The mysterious figures in the reflection appeared to be interacting with the reflected versions of the real patrons in ways that suggested they were somehow present in the same space, despite being invisible in the actual saloon scene. In one area of the reflection, the mysterious man in formal dress appeared to be standing directly behind one of the real patrons, his hand positioned as if resting on the man's shoulder. In another section, one of the less distinct anomalous figures seemed to be leaning over a table where reflected patrons were playing cards, as if observing their game with intense interest. These interactions suggested that the mysterious figures were not simply random apparitions or photographic errors, but were somehow present in the saloon. At the time the photograph was taken, visible only in the mirror's reflection, the implications of this possibility were deeply unsettling. Dr. Whitmore suggested that they examine the museum's archives to see if any other photographs from Silver Falls existed. If they could find additional images from the same location and time period, they might be able to determine whether the mirror anomalies were isolated to this single photograph or represented a broader pattern of unusual phenomena. Their search through the museum's extensive photographic collections yielded 2 additional images from Silver Falls, both taken during the same general time period as the saloon photograph. One showed the town's main street, while the other captured the interior of what appeared to be a general store. Both photographs were of excellent technical quality and showed typical frontier scenes. But when Dr. Martinez and Dr. Whitmore examined these additional images under magnification, they made discoveries that deepened the mystery considerably. Both photographs contained reflective surfaces, windows and glass display cases, and in each case, these reflective surfaces showed anomalies similar to those in the saloon mirror. The main street photograph included a storefront window that reflected the street scene, but the reflection contained additional figures that were not present in the actual street. The general store image showed a glass display case that reflected the store's interior, but again the reflection included mysterious figures that had no counterparts in the real scene. Most disturbing of all, the same formally dressed man appeared in the reflections in all 3 photographs. In each case, he was positioned differently and seemed to be observing different aspects of the town's daily life, but his presence was consistent across all the images. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Whitmore spent the rest of the day examining every detail of the 3 photographs, using the most advanced analytical techniques at their disposal. What they discovered challenged their understanding of both photography and reality itself. The mysterious figures in the reflections appeared to be following the normal laws of optics in every way, except for their presence in the physical world. They cast appropriate shadows within the reflected spaces. They appeared at the correct angles and proportions for their apparent positions, and they interacted with the reflected environment in ways that suggested they were genuinely present in some form. But most unnaturally, the figures seemed to be aware of being photographed. In each image, the formally dressed man appeared to be looking directly at the camera, his gaze somehow penetrating through the reflection to meet the eyes of the photographer and, by extension, anyone who viewed the images. As evening approached, Dr. Martinez found herself alone in her laboratory, staring at the collection of photographs spread across her workstation. The mysterious figures looked back at her from their reflected prisons, their presence a challenge to everything she thought she understood about the nature of photographic documentation. She decided to research the photographer who had taken the images, hoping to find information that might shed light on the circumstances surrounding their creation. The documentation provided few clues, listing the photographer only as J. Morrison, with no additional details about their identity or background. Her search through photographic archives and historical records eventually led her to information about a traveling photographer named Jacob Morrison, who had worked throughout the Montana Territory during the 1890s. Morrison had been known for his skill in capturing frontier life, and his photographs were considered valuable historical documents of the American West. But Dr. Martinez's research also revealed that Morrison had disappeared in late 1895, around the same time that Silver Falls had been abandoned. His photographic equipment had been found in his hotel room in a nearby town, but Morrison himself had vanished without a trace. The timing of his disappearance, so close to the abandonment of Silver Falls, seemed like more than mere coincidence. Dr. Martinez found herself drawn deeper into the mystery, spending hours each day researching every aspect of the photographs and the history surrounding them. She contacted other museums and historical societies, looking for additional photographs taken by Morrison or any other documentation of the events in Silver Falls. Her inquiries eventually led her to a private collector in Helena who claimed to have several other photographs taken by Morrison in the weeks before his disappearance. The collector, an elderly woman named Eleanor Hartwell, agreed to meet with Dr. Martinez and share her collection, though she warned that the images had always made her uncomfortable. When Dr. Martinez met with Mrs. Hartwell at her home, she found a woman who appeared genuinely disturbed by the photographs in her possession. Mrs. Hartwell explained that she had inherited them from her grandfather, who had been a contemporary of Morrison's and had acquired the images shortly after the photographer's disappearance. Mrs. Hartwell showed Dr. Martinez 4 additional photographs taken by Morrison, all apparently shot in Silver Falls during the same time period as the Saloon image. Each photograph showed the same pattern of anomalies that Dr. Martinez had observed in the museum's collection. Reflective surfaces throughout the images contained mysterious figures that had no counterparts in the physical scenes. But these additional photographs revealed something even more disturbing. The mysterious figures appeared to be growing more numerous and more distinct in the later images, as if their presence in the reflected world was somehow strengthening over time. In Morrison's final photographs, the reflected spaces were crowded with anomalous figures, while the real scenes remained unchanged. Mrs. Hartwell shared one final piece of information that sent chills down Dr. Martinez's spine. Among Morrison's personal effects, which had been found in his hotel room after his disappearance, was a journal in which he had recorded his observations about the strange phenomena he had been witnessing and photographing in Silver Falls. The journal entries, which Mrs. Hartwell's grandfather had preserved along with the photographs, painted a picture of a photographer who had initially been excited by the opportunity to document unusual phenomena, but who had gradually become terrified by what he was witnessing. Morrison's final entries described his growing conviction that the mysterious figures in the reflections were not simply supernatural manifestations, but were somehow using the photographic process to gain access to the physical world. According to Morrison's journal, the figures seemed to become more solid and more capable of influencing physical events with each photograph he took. He wrote about objects moving in his hotel room, voices speaking to him from mirrors and windows, and a growing sense that he was being watched and followed by entities that existed primarily in reflected spaces. Morrison's final entry, dated just days before his disappearance, expressed his intention to stop photographing in Silver Falls and leave the territory immediately. He wrote that he had come to believe that his photographic work was somehow feeding the mysterious entities, giving them the energy and substance they needed to manifest more fully in the physical world. Dr. Martinez read Morrison's journal with growing unease, recognizing parallels between his experiences and her own growing obsession with the mysterious photographs. Like Morrison, she found herself spending more and more time studying the images, enhancing and analyzing every detail in an attempt to understand what she was seeing. And like Morrison, she had begun to notice strange occurrences in her own life that seemed connected to her research. She started seeing figures in her peripheral vision, shadowy forms that vanished when she turned to look at them directly. She heard voices and footsteps in empty corridors of the museum, sounds that had no apparent source. Most disturbing of all, Dr. Martinez began to see the formally dressed man from the photographs appearing in reflective surfaces throughout her daily life. She glimpsed him in windows, mirrors, and even the screens of electronic devices, always watching her with that same intense gaze that had first caught her attention in the Saloon photograph. Martinez tried to convince herself that these experiences were simply the result of stress and overwork, the natural consequence of spending too much time focused on disturbing historical materials. But the experiences became more frequent and more vivid as she continued her research, suggesting that something more than psychological stress might be involved. She decided to consult with Dr. Sarah Chen, a colleague who specialized in the psychological effects of intensive historical research. Dr. Chen had studied cases where researchers had become so absorbed in their work that they began to experience symptoms similar to those described by the subjects of their research. Dr. Chen listened to Dr. Martinez's account with interest and concern, explaining that she had encountered similar cases in her own work. According to Chen, there were documented instances where researchers studying traumatic historical events had begun to experience psychological symptoms that mirrored those of the people they were studying. The phenomenon was thought to work through a kind of psychological resonance, where the researchers' intense focus on disturbing material created a bridge between their own mental state and the experiences of historical subjects. In extreme cases, researchers had reported experiencing hallucinations and other symptoms that seemed to recreate the experiences of people who had lived decades or even centuries earlier. Dr. Chen suggested that Dr. Martinez might be experiencing what researchers in her field called sympathetic manifestation, a phenomenon where someone who studied supernatural or unexplained events too closely could begin to experience similar phenomena in their own life. She advised Dr. Martinez to take a break from her research and to distance herself from the Morrison photographs as much as possible. But Dr. Martinez found herself unable to follow this advice. Despite her growing fear and the increasingly disturbing experiences she was having, she felt compelled to continue her research, driven by a need to understand what Morrison had discovered and what had ultimately happened to him. She returned to her laboratory and began an even more intensive analysis of the photographs, using advanced digital techniques to enhance every detail of the reflected images. As she worked, she began to notice additional anomalies that she had previously missed. The mysterious figures in the reflections appeared to be aging and changing over the course of Morrison's photographic sequence. In the earliest images, they were indistinct and barely visible, but in the later photographs, they became increasingly clear and detailed, as if they were somehow gaining substance and definition through the photographic process itself. More disturbing still, Dr. Martinez began to see her own reflection appearing in the enhanced images of the mirrors and windows. At first, she dismissed this as a processing artifact or a trick of the light, but as she continued her analysis, she realized that her reflection was appearing in photographs taken over a century before her birth. The appearance of her own image in the historical photographs was impossible to explain through any rational means. Yet, there she was, clearly visible in the enhanced reflections, standing among the mysterious figures as if she belonged with them. In some images, she appeared to be interacting with the other anomalous figures, as if she were part of their strange community. Dr. Martinez stared at the impossible images in shock and disbelief. How could her reflection appear in photographs taken decades before she was born? The rational part of her mind insisted that she must be seeing patterns in random visual noise, that her intensive study of the photographs was causing her to project her own image onto ambiguous shapes in the reflections. But the images were too clear, too detailed, to be explained by imagination or wishful thinking. They showed not just her general appearance, but specific details that were unique to her, including a distinctive scar on her hand that she had acquired in childhood and a piece of jewelry that she wore daily. As Dr. Martinez continued to stare at the enhanced images, she began to understand what Morrison had realized in his final days in Silver Falls. The photographs were not simply documenting supernatural events that had occurred in the past. They were somehow creating a connection between past and present, allowing the mysterious figures to reach across time and claim new victims. By studying the photographs so intensively, Dr. Martinez had somehow inserted herself into the supernatural narrative of Silver Falls. She had become part of the story that Morrison had been documenting, another victim of the entities that existed in the spaces between reality and reflection. Dr. Martinez tried to stop her research, to put the photographs away and forget about the mystery of Silver Falls, but she found that she could not. Every time she tried to focus on other work, her attention was drawn back to Morrison's images. She felt compelled to continue enhancing and analyzing them, even though she now understood that doing so was somehow sealing her own fate. The supernatural experiences in her daily life intensified dramatically. She began to see the mysterious figures from the photographs in her own environment, standing in the corridors of the museum, appearing in reflections, and watching her from the shadows of her own home. Most terrifying of all, she began to see the formally dressed man himself, the central figure from Morrison's photographs. He appeared to her exactly as he had in the historical images, watching her with those intense eyes that seemed to see through to her very soul. Dr. Martinez realized that she was experiencing the same progression of events that had claimed Morrison over a century ago. The supernatural entities were gradually drawing her into their realm, using her own research and curiosity as the mechanism for her recruitment. She tried to seek help from Dr. Chen and other colleagues, but found that she could not adequately explain what was happening to her without sounding delusional. The supernatural experiences were intensely personal and subjective, impossible to document or verify through conventional means. As her situation deteriorated, Dr. Martinez began to understand that she had only one option remaining. She would have to find a way to break the connection between herself and the supernatural entities of Silver Falls, even if it meant destroying Morrison's photographs and all the research she had conducted. But when she attempted to destroy the images, she found that they seemed to resist her efforts. Digital files that she deleted reappeared on her computer. Physical photographs that she tried to damage remained unharmed. The supernatural entities had apparently grown strong enough to protect their means of influence in the modern world. Dr. Martinez's research had revealed that the supernatural activity in Silver Falls was not random or chaotic, but followed specific patterns and rules. The mysterious entities appeared to be bound by certain limitations, unable to exist fully in the physical world, but capable of influencing it through reflective surfaces and photographic documentation. She began to study these patterns more carefully, hoping to find some weakness or vulnerability that she could exploit. Her analysis revealed that the entities seemed to be strongest when they were being actively observed or documented, but weakened when they were ignored or forgotten. This discovery led Dr. Martinez to develop a new strategy. Instead of trying to destroy the photographs, she would work to limit their influence by ensuring that they were never again subjected to the kind of intensive study that had awakened the supernatural entities. She would hide them away, bury them in the archives where they would be forgotten and ignored. But as she prepared to implement this plan, Dr. Martinez made another disturbing discovery. The supernatural entities were not confined to Morrison's original photographs. They had somehow spread to other images in the museum's collection, infecting them with the same anomalous properties that characterized the Silver Falls pictures. Dr. Martinez found mysterious figures appearing in photographs that had previously shown nothing unusual. Images of other frontier towns began to show the same reflected anomalies that had marked Morrison's work. The supernatural influence was spreading through the archive like a contagion, claiming more and more of the historical record. She realized that her efforts to study and understand the phenomenon had inadvertently helped it to spread. By enhancing and analyzing the original photographs, She had somehow strengthened the supernatural entities and given them the power to extend their influence beyond their original boundaries. Dr. Martinez began to understand that she was facing something far more dangerous than a simple haunting. The supernatural entities of Silver Falls were not just seeking to claim individual victims, but were working to corrupt the entire photographic record, to insert themselves into humanity's visual memory and become a permanent part of the documented past. The implications were staggering. If the supernatural entities succeeded in their apparent goal, they could potentially rewrite visual history itself, creating false images and fictional events that would become accepted as historical fact. The boundary between reality and supernatural fiction would become blurred beyond recognition. Dr. Martinez realized that she had become the unwitting agent of this corruption, her research serving as the mechanism by which the supernatural entities spread their influence. Every photograph she enhanced, every detail she analyzed, every pattern she identified, all contributed to the growing power of the entities from Silver Falls. She tried to warn her colleagues about the danger, but found that they were unable to see the anomalies that had become so obvious to her. The supernatural influence seemed to be selective, affecting only those who studied the images with sufficient intensity and focus. Her warnings were dismissed as the products of stress and overwork. Dr. Martinez found herself increasingly isolated, the only person who could see the growing corruption of the photographic record. She watched helplessly as more and more images in the collection began to show signs of supernatural influence, their original subjects gradually being joined by the mysterious figures from Silver Falls. The supernatural entities seemed to be using her own expertise against her, exploiting her knowledge of photographic analysis and historical research to spread their influence more effectively. They had learned from her methods, adapting their techniques to match her analytical approaches. Dr. Martinez began to realize that her only hope lay in finding some way to reverse the process she had inadvertently started. She would need to find a method of removing the supernatural influence from the photographs, of restoring them to their original, uncontaminated state. Her research led her to explore various theories about the nature of photographic images and their relationship to reality. She studied the work of early photographers who had reported supernatural phenomena in their images, looking for clues about how such influences might be countered or removed. Dr. Martinez discovered that several 19th century photographers had developed techniques for what they called spiritual cleansing of photographic images, methods that were supposed to remove unwanted supernatural influences from pictures. These techniques had been dismissed by mainstream photography as superstition, but Dr. Martinez began to wonder if they might contain some element of truth. She experimented with various approaches, trying to find some way to restore the corrupted photographs to their original state. Some methods seemed to have temporary effects, causing the mysterious figures to fade or become less distinct. But the supernatural influence always returned, often stronger than before. Dr. Martinez's experiments revealed that the supernatural entities were not simply passive imprints left by traumatic events, but active, intelligent beings that could adapt and respond to attempts to remove them. They seemed to learn from each effort to cleanse the photographs, developing new methods of resistance and infiltration. As her research continued, Dr. Martinez began to notice that the supernatural influence was not confined to the photographs themselves, but was beginning to affect the physical environment of the museum. She started seeing mysterious figures in the archive rooms, hearing voices and footsteps in empty corridors, and experiencing temperature drops and electrical disturbances that had no apparent cause. The building itself seemed to be becoming a conduit for the supernatural entities, allowing them to manifest in the physical world rather than being confined to photographic reflections. Dr. Martinez realized that her intensive study of the corrupted photographs had somehow created a bridge between the supernatural realm and physical reality. She tried to limit her exposure to the affected photographs, but found that the supernatural influence had grown too strong to be easily avoided. The mysterious figures from Silver Falls now appeared to her regularly, both in the museum and in her daily life outside the institution. During this period of escalating supernatural activity, Dr. Martinez began to notice that the manifestations followed certain patterns that seemed to correspond to lunar cycles and other celestial events. The mysterious figures appeared more frequently, and with greater clarity during certain phases of the moon, suggesting that their ability to manifest in the physical world was somehow tied to natural astronomical phenomena. This discovery led Dr. Martinez to research the astronomical conditions that had existed during the original events in Silver Falls. She found that the town's abandonment had occurred during a rare celestial alignment when several planets were in conjunction, and a lunar eclipse was visible from the Montana Territory. Dr. Martinez began to theorize that the supernatural entities were not simply random paranormal phenomena, but were connected to specific cosmic events that created favorable conditions for their manifestation. The original disturbance that had allowed them to enter the physical world had occurred during one such alignment, and their subsequent activity had been strongest during similar celestial events. This understanding led Dr. Martinez to develop a new approach to dealing with the supernatural entities. Instead of trying to fight them directly, she would work to predict and prepare for the times when they would be strongest, and use the periods of weakness to implement countermeasures. Dr. Martinez's research revealed that the next major celestial alignment would occur in just a few weeks, creating conditions that would likely strengthen the supernatural entities dramatically. She realized that this event might represent her last opportunity to break free from their influence before they became too powerful to resist. She began preparing for what she knew would be a final confrontation with the entities from Silver Falls. Using her knowledge of their patterns and weaknesses, she developed a plan that she hoped would either free her from their influence or at least prevent them from spreading their corruption further. Dr. Martinez's plan involved using the supernatural entities' own methods against them. Just as they had used photographic documentation to spread their influence, she would use similar techniques to contain and redirect their power. She would create a comprehensive photographic record of their manifestations, but instead of enhancing and analyzing the images, she would deliberately distort and corrupt them, breaking the connection between the supernatural entities and their visual representations. The process would be dangerous, requiring her to expose herself to the full power of the supernatural entities during their period of greatest strength. But Dr. Martinez believed it was her only chance to prevent the entities from achieving their apparent goal of corrupting the entire photographic record. As the celestial alignment approached, Dr. Martinez began to notice increased supernatural activity throughout the museum building. Mysterious figures appeared more frequently and with greater clarity, and the temperature drops and electrical disturbances became more severe. The building itself seemed to be responding to the approaching cosmic event, as if it were somehow attuned to the same forces that had originally created the supernatural disturbances in Silver Falls. Dr. Martinez's colleagues began to notice the strange occurrences as well, though they attributed them to equipment malfunctions and environmental factors. Several staff members reported seeing shadowy figures in the corridors, and the building's security system began registering unexplained motion detector activations and door openings. The night of the celestial alignment, Dr. Martinez remained in the archives after the museum had been closed to the public. She had prepared her equipment and positioned herself in the room where Morrison's photographs were stored, ready to implement her plan when the supernatural entities reached their peak strength. As the alignment reached its maximum point, the supernatural manifestations intensified dramatically. The mysterious figures from Silver Falls appeared throughout the archive room, no longer confined to photographic reflections, but manifesting as semi-solid apparitions that moved freely through the physical space. The formally dressed man materialized directly in front of Dr. Martinez, his intense gaze fixed on her with an otherworldly awareness that seemed to pierce through to her very soul. For the first time since she had begun seeing him, the mysterious figure spoke, his voice carrying the hollow echo of someone speaking from across the boundaries of reality. He told Dr. Martinez that she had been chosen to serve as a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of reflected shadows, that her research and expertise made her uniquely qualified to help the supernatural entities achieve their goal of permanent manifestation in the physical world. He explained that the entities from Silver Falls were not simply seeking to claim individual victims, but were working to create a new reality where the boundaries between the physical world and the reflected realm no longer existed. Dr. Martinez listened to the figure's words with a mixture of fascination and terror, understanding for the first time the true scope of what she was facing. The supernatural entities were not content to exist as mere reflections or shadows, but were seeking to fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself, to create a world where they could exist as equals to the living. The mysterious man offered Dr. Martinez a choice. She could join them willingly and help them achieve their goal, or she could resist and face the same fate as Morrison and the residents of Silver Falls. He explained that her research had already made her partially connected to their realm, and that it would be a simple matter to complete the transformation and bring her fully into their reflected world. Dr. Martinez realized that this was the moment she had been preparing for, the final test of her plan to break free from the supernatural entity's influence. She activated her equipment and began the process she had designed, using her photographic techniques to create distorted and corrupted images of the supernatural manifestations around her. The effect was immediate and dramatic. As Dr. Martinez captured and distorted the images of the supernatural entities, they began to lose coherence and stability. The mysterious figures flickered and wavered, their forms becoming less distinct and their presence less overwhelming. The formally dressed man reacted with surprise and anger, realizing that Dr. Martinez was using their own methods against them. He attempted to stop her, but found that his ability to interact with the physical world was being weakened by her photographic interference. Dr. Martinez continued her work, systematically documenting and corrupting the supernatural manifestations throughout the archive room. With each distorted image she created, the mysterious figures became less solid and less threatening, their connection to the physical world gradually being severed. But the process was taking a toll on Dr. Martinez as well. The intense exposure to supernatural forces during their period of peak strength was affecting her both physically and mentally. She began to feel disoriented and disconnected from reality, as if she were being pulled between two different worlds. As the celestial alignment reached its conclusion, the supernatural entities began to weaken naturally. Combined with the effects of Dr. Martinez's photographic interference, this created a window of opportunity for her to complete her plan and break free from their influence. With a final burst of effort, Dr. Martinez created one last distorted image that seemed to shatter the connection between the supernatural entities and the physical world. The mysterious figures vanished abruptly, and the oppressive atmosphere that had filled the archive room lifted like a fog being blown away by a strong wind. Dr. Martinez collapsed from exhaustion, but she had succeeded in her goal. The supernatural entities from Silver Falls had been driven back to their reflected realm, and their influence over the museum's collection had been broken. However, Dr. Martinez's victory came at a significant personal cost. The intense exposure to supernatural forces had left her permanently changed, her perception of reality forever altered by her experience. She found that she could still see traces of the reflected world overlapping with the physical realm, though the threatening presence of the Silver Falls entities had been eliminated. In the weeks following the confrontation, Dr. Martinez worked to document her experience and develop protocols for preventing similar supernatural infiltrations in the future. She collaborated with Dr. Chen and other researchers to create a network of institutions that could identify and contain dangerous historical materials before they could spread their influence. Dr. Martinez's research revealed that the phenomenon she had encountered was not unique to Silver Falls. Similar supernatural infiltrations had occurred at archives and museums around the world, often triggered by intensive study of traumatic historical events that had left psychic imprints on physical objects. The network developed by Dr. Martinez and her colleagues began to identify patterns in these supernatural manifestations, creating early warning systems that could detect the presence of dangerous materials before they could affect researchers. They also developed techniques for safely studying such materials without triggering supernatural activity. Despite these precautions, new cases continued to emerge regularly. The boundary between the documented past and the supernatural realm seemed to be inherently unstable, requiring constant vigilance to maintain. Dr. Martinez found herself at the center of a growing community of researchers who worked quietly to protect the integrity of the historical record from supernatural corruption. The Morrison photographs remained in the Smithsonian's collection, but they were now stored in a specially designed containment system that prevented them from manifesting supernatural activity. The images could still be studied, but only under carefully controlled conditions that limited exposure and prevented the kind of intensive analysis that had originally awakened the supernatural entities. Dr. Martinez continued her work as a photographic conservator, but her role had expanded to include supernatural threat assessment and containment. She became one of the leading experts in identifying and neutralizing dangerous historical materials, her experience with the Silver Falls entities serving as the foundation for new protocols and procedures. The formally dressed man of Silver Falls had been contained, but his image remained as a reminder of the dangers that lurked within the photographic record. Dr. Martinez kept a copy of the original Saloon photograph in her office, not as a trophy of her victory, but as a warning of what could happen when the boundaries between reality and reflection became too thin. The photograph showed the mysterious man standing in the mirror's reflection, his intense gaze no longer threatening, but somehow sad, as if he understood that his chance to escape the confines of the reflected realm had been lost forever. The mirror now reflected only the interior of the saloon, the supernatural figures having faded back into whatever dimension they had emerged from. Dr. Martinez's final journal entries, discovered weeks later by concerned colleagues, described her growing realization that she had become trapped in the same supernatural web that had claimed Morrison and the residents of Silver Falls. She wrote about her intention to travel to the site of the abandoned town, hoping to find some way to break the connection, or at least understand what had really happened there. She theorized that the supernatural entities might be weaker at their point of origin, that the physical location of Silver Falls might hold some key to understanding and potentially defeating them. Her plan was to visit the abandoned town site and attempt to perform some kind of ritual cleansing that might break the connection between the supernatural entities and the photographic images. Dr. Martinez's research had revealed that Silver Falls had been built on land that had previously been considered sacred by local Native American tribes, a place where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was naturally thin. The mining operations had somehow disturbed this balance, creating conditions that allowed supernatural entities to manifest more easily in the physical world. She believed that the key to stopping the supernatural influence lay in somehow restoring the natural balance that had been disrupted by the mining operations. Her plan was to perform a ritual based on Native American traditions, hoping to appease the disturbed spirits and convince them to return to their proper realm. Dr. Rebecca Martinez was reported missing 3 days after her final journal entry. Her car was found abandoned on a remote mountain road near the location where Silver Falls had once stood. Despite extensive searches by local authorities, no trace of her was ever found. The photographs that had started her investigation remained in the archives of the Smithsonian Institution, filed away in a restricted collection that required special permission to access. The official records listed them as historically significant, but potentially disturbing, requiring careful handling by qualified researchers. But sometimes late at night when the museum was empty, security guards reported seeing lights in the archive rooms where Morrison's photographs were stored. When they investigated, they found nothing unusual, just the quiet rows of climate-controlled storage units that held the nation's photographic heritage. The Saloon photograph remained exactly as Dr. Martinez had left it, enhanced and analyzed down to the smallest detail. The mysterious figure in the mirror reflection continued to watch with those intense eyes, waiting patiently for the next researcher who would be drawn to study his impossible presence. And in the mirror's reflection, careful observers could now make out additional figures among the mysterious forms. Morrison was there, his camera still visible in his hands. Dr. Martinez stood beside him, wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when she disappeared. Both appeared to be watching, waiting for someone else to discover their story and become part of it. The mystery of Silver Falls remained unsolved, but it was no longer a historical puzzle. It had become an active supernatural force, using the very human desire to understand and document the past as a means of claiming new victims across the centuries. The formally dressed man still stood in his reflected realm, and he would continue to stand there, patient and eternal, until someone else was curious enough to look too closely at his impossible presence in a photograph that should have captured nothing more than a moment of ordinary frontier life. The truth about what had happened in Silver Falls remained hidden in the shadows of the past, protected by entities that had learned to use human curiosity and the permanence of photographic documentation as weapons against the living. Some mysteries, it seemed, were better left unsolved, and some photographs were better left unexamined. But the images remained in their archive, waiting for the next researcher, who would be unable to resist the challenge of explaining the impossible, the next victim who would discover too late that some historical documents were not meant to be preserved, but to preserve those who studied them too closely. The mysterious man watched and waited from his position in the mirror's reflection, ready to welcome the next curious soul who would look too closely at his impossible presence in a photograph that had become a doorway between worlds, a gateway that remained forever open, forever hungry for new victims to add to its supernatural collection. Years passed, and the restricted collection remained largely undisturbed. The Smithsonian had implemented new protocols for handling potentially dangerous historical materials, though the official explanations focused on preservation concerns rather than supernatural threats. Only a few senior staff members knew the true reason why certain photographs required special handling and limited access. The Morrison photographs remained the most dangerous items in the museum's collection, but they were no longer unique. Similar materials had been identified in archives and institutions around the world, each carrying its own supernatural influence and posing its own unique threats to those who studied them too closely. The mysterious man of Silver Falls had become something of a legend among those who knew about such things, a cautionary tale about the dangers of delving too deeply into certain historical mysteries. His image served as a reminder that some aspects of the past were better left undisturbed, that not all historical questions were meant to be answered, but the human desire to understand and document the past remained as strong as ever, and new researchers continued to be drawn to the mysteries hidden in historical photographs. The supernatural entities that had claimed Morrison, Dr. A. Martinez, and countless others waited patiently for their next victims, knowing that curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge would eventually bring new prey within their reach. The Saloon photograph remained in its restricted file, the mysterious man still standing in the mirror's reflection, with his knowing gaze and timeless presence. In the reflected space behind him, the supernatural realm continued to grow, adding new figures as more researchers fell victim to the entities they had tried to study and understand. The mystery of Silver Falls had become something far more dangerous than a historical puzzle. It had evolved into a supernatural trap that used humanity's own desire for knowledge and understanding as bait, claiming new victims across the decades and adding them to its ever-growing collection of the lost and the forgotten. And somewhere in the mountains of Montana, in a place that no longer appeared on any map, the ruins of Silver Falls waited in the shadows, a physical anchor for supernatural entities that had learned to exist in the space between reality and reflection, between the documented and the real, between the living and the dead. The mysterious man would continue his eternal vigil, watching and waiting from his position in the mirror's reflection, ready to welcome the next curious soul who would look too closely at his impossible presence in a photograph that had become a doorway between worlds, a gateway that remained forever open, forever hungry for new victims to add to its supernatural collection. In the depths of the Smithsonian's archives, the Morrison collection waited in its climate-controlled storage, each photograph a potential trap for the unwary researcher. The mysterious man's formal dress continued to appear crisp and timeless, a beacon calling out to those who sought to understand the mysteries of the past, promising answers but delivering only eternal servitude in a realm where the boundaries between reality and reflection had been forever blurred. The story of Silver Falls had become a living thing, growing stronger with each telling, each investigation, each attempt to understand its impossible truths. And the mysterious man stood ready to welcome all who would join him in his eternal watch, adding their voices to the chorus of the lost and the forgotten, the researchers and photographers who had looked too deeply into the reflected shadows of the past and found themselves trapped there forever. The legacy of Dr. Rebecca Martinez lived on in the protocols and procedures she had helped develop, the network of researchers who continued her work of identifying and containing supernatural threats within historical collections. Her sacrifice had not been in vain, as her methods had prevented countless other researchers from falling victim to similar supernatural traps. But the work was never finished, the vigilance never complete. New threats emerged regularly. New mysteries presented themselves to curious minds, and new victims were claimed by forces that existed beyond the boundaries of normal human understanding. The mysterious man of Silver Falls remained as a reminder that some doors, once opened, could never be fully closed, and some mysteries were better left forever unsolved. The reflected realm continued to exist parallel to the physical world, separated by the thinnest of barriers that could be breached by those who looked too deeply into the spaces between reality and documentation. And in that reflected realm, the mysterious man waited with infinite patience, knowing that human curiosity would eventually bring him new companions to share his eternal vigil in the shadows between worlds.